The champagne flutes were still clinking when my father destroyed my career. We were standing in the glass atrium of the Modern Art Museum, a building I had designed blueprint by blueprint. I stood there expecting him to finally announce my partnership. Instead, he handed the microphone to my younger sister Brianna. To the new face of the firm, he beamed. Then he turned to me, his voice amplified across the silent room. "Sophia, we are transitioning you out. Your vision is just too functional for where we are going." I didn't blink. I just watched the legacy I built dissolve into thin air. Before I tell you what I did next, drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. The museum's glass walls reflected my own stillness. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. My father's words hung in the air, heavy and final. Functional. As if that was an insult. As if keeping a building standing was somehow less important than making it look good on Instagram. I looked at Brianna beaming in her designer dress, already posing for photos. She was the image my father wanted. I was just the tool he had used to build the pedestal she was standing on. 10 years ago, my father's business was a failing landscaping company with more debt than clients. He was brilliant with plants but hopeless with logistics. I was 22, fresh out of architecture school with a head full of sustainable design and a heart full of loyalty. I stepped in. Not as an employee, but as a savior. I worked 80-hour weeks trading sleep for permits and weekends for site inspections. While Brianna was busy curating her social media feed and attending networking brunches, I was in the mud, literally. I secured the complex green permits that allowed us to bid on government contracts. I drafted the blueprints for our first major eco-project, the one that put us on the map. I was the one who figured out how to integrate solar panels into heritage buildings without violating preservation codes. I built the foundation of this empire brick by eco-friendly brick. My father loved the results. He loved the magazine covers, the awards, the sudden influx of cash. But he never seemed to connect the success to the grueling work I was doing. To him, the success was a reflection of his own genius, his own brand. Brianna was the perfect extension of that brand. She was charming, photogenic, and knew how to work a room. She became the face of the company, the one who accepted the awards I had earned. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that the work was its own reward. But deep down I knew the truth. I was the scapegoat, the workhorse, the one expected to sacrifice everything for the family legacy. And Brianna, she was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who was destined for greatness simply by existing. My father didn't just love her more. He saw her as the ideal version of himself. I was just the invisible pillar holding up their sky. And now here we were, the culmination of a decade of sacrifice. I had built them an $85 million empire, and their gratitude was a public firing. I looked at my father one last time. He wasn't even looking at me. He was watching Brianna, his face glowing with pride. He had chosen his legacy. He had chosen the image over the substance. And in doing so, he had made a fatal miscalculation. He had forgotten that a building is only as strong as its foundation. And he had just tried to demolish his own. I turned and walked away, not out of shame but out of clarity. The gala continued behind me, a blur of laughter and applause. But my mind was already racing, calculating, planning. I wasn't just leaving a party, I was leaving a life. And I was taking my foundation with me. I walked straight up to the podium where my father and Brianna were accepting their applause. My father tensed, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second. He expected a scene. He expected me to grab the microphone, to scream, to beg for my job back. He was ready for a tantrum because a tantrum he could handle. A tantrum would prove I was emotional, unstable, exactly the kind of liability he had just described to the board. But I didn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small, heavy box wrapped in silver paper. It was a vintage compass from the 1920s, solid brass, something I had spent 3 months tracking down for his birthday. I placed it in his hand. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said. My voice was steady, void of any tremor. He looked at the box, then at me, and his shoulders relaxed. He smiled, a genuine, relieved smile. He thought it was a peace offering. He thought I was accepting my demotion with the grace of a dutiful daughter. He thought he had won. I didn't correct him. I turned my back on the celebration and walked out into the cool night air. I didn't wait for the valet. I walked 3 blocks to my car, my heels clicking a rhythmic beat against the pavement. I didn't go home. I drove straight to the office. It was midnight when I swiped my key card for the last time. The building was silent, bathed in the soft blue glow of the security lights. I walked past the reception desk, past the awards cabinet filled with trophies I had won but Brianna had accepted, and into my office. I didn't pack my plants. I didn't pack the photos of family vacations that no longer felt real. I didn't touch the stapler or the fancy ergonomic chair. I was there for the only things that actually mattered. I took my architectural licenses off the wall. The state certifications, the LEED accreditations, the master builder permits. These weren't just pieces of paper. They were the legal bedrock of the firm. Without them, the firm was just a marketing agency with a nice logo. Next, I went to the secure server room. I didn't delete anything. That would be petty and illegal. Instead, I removed my personal hard drives, the ones containing the proprietary GreenTech patent designs I had developed over the last 5 years. These designs were my intellectual property registered under my name, not the company's. My father had never bothered to check the fine print on the filing documents because he assumed he owned me and therefore he owned my work. I placed the drives in a cardboard box next to the licenses. I looked around the office one last time. It looked exactly the same as it had that morning, but it was fundamentally different. I had removed the engine from the Ferrari. They still had the shiny paint and the leather seats, but when they tried to turn the key on Monday morning, they were going to find out that the car wasn't going anywhere. I walked out of the building carrying a single box. It wasn't heavy, but it held the entire weight of $85 million in contracts. I locked the door behind me. I felt a strange, cold sense of peace. The demolition had begun. The next morning, my phone was a graveyard of missed calls and aggressive texts. It was Sunday, the day after the gala, the day my family expected me to be groveling for forgiveness. Instead, I was sitting in my quiet apartment drinking coffee and watching the notifications roll in. Brianna had posted a photo on social media. It was a selfie of her and my father at the office, captioned, "New era. New vision. Goodbye to the rigid old ways." The comments were filled with congratulations from people who had no idea what those rigid old ways actually entailed. They didn't know those ways included legal compliance, structural integrity, and actually paying the bills. My father had left a voicemail. I played it on speaker, his voice filling the room with familiar arrogance. "Sophia, I expect you in the office on Monday morning to hand over your files and train your sister. Don't be ungrateful. We gave you a career. Now it's time to support the family vision." I deleted the message. Support the family vision. That phrase echoed in my mind, bitter and hollow. For years, I had been the invisible pillar holding up their vision. I was the load-bearing wall they decided to knock down because it blocked the view. They didn't understand that without the wall, the roof comes crashing down. I thought about all the missed birthdays, the canceled vacations, the relationships that withered because I was too busy working. I thought about the times I had covered for Brianna's mistakes, rewriting her proposals the night before a deadline so she wouldn't look incompetent. I thought about the times I had corrected my father's budget errors so he wouldn't bankrupt us. I had done it all out of love, out of a desperate need to be seen, to be valued. But you can't build a home for people who only see you as a contractor. You can't be the foundation for a family that treats you like dirt. I looked around my apartment. It was small, minimalist, paid for with the salary I had fought tooth and nail to negotiate. It wasn't a mansion, it wasn't a glass-walled museum, but it was mine. It was sturdy, it was real, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of losing their approval. I was afraid of wasting one more second of my life building their dreams. I picked up my phone and texted my lawyer, Mr. Vance. "It's time." I didn't wait for a reply. I knew he was already preparing the paperwork. I turned off my phone, finished my coffee, and watched the sun climb higher in the sky. The noise from my family was just background static now. The real storm was coming, and I was the only one with an umbrella. Monday morning, I didn't go to the office. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't check my email. I went to the towering steel and glass headquarters of Vance & Associates, the city's most ruthless contract law firm. I sat in a leather chair across from Mr. Vance, a man whose smile was as sharp as his suits. "We have everything," I asked. "Everything," he confirmed, tapping a thick file on his desk. "The termination notices for the 3 major clients are drafted. The formal resignation letter, citing constructive dismissal, is ready. And the fraud report for the GreenTech billing," I added. He nodded. "Ready to file with the state attorney general. Then let's push the button." At 9 a.m., while Brianna was likely ordering a celebratory latte and my father was preparing to give a speech about the firm's new direction, 3 courier bikes arrived at the headquarters of our biggest clients. The packages they delivered contained a single legally binding document. It wasn't a request. It was a notification. It informed them that Sophia, the lead architect named in the key person clause of their contracts, had been terminated. Therefore, pursuant to Section 14, Paragraph B, their contracts with the firm were immediately null and void. By 9:30 a.m., my phone started buzzing. Not with calls from my family, but with alerts from industry news sites. Major eco project halted. Contract dispute rocks local firm. Key architect departs. The dominoes were falling faster than I had anticipated. By 10 a.m., the firm had lost $85 million in future revenue. But the real kill shot wasn't the money. It was the legality. Without a licensed lead architect on record, the firm wasn't just losing clients, it was losing its right to operate. I sat in the quiet of the law office sipping tea, imagining the scene at my old firm. The panic, the shouting, the realization that the rigid old ways they had mocked were actually the structural supports keeping the roof from collapsing on their heads. My father had wanted a legacy. He had wanted a brand. Well, now he had one. He was the man who fired the only person who knew how to keep the lights on. And Brianna, she was the managing partner of a sinking ship holding a wheel that was no longer connected to the rudder. Mr. Vance looked up from his tablet. The city inspector just issued a stop work order for the downtown high-rise, he said. Apparently they tried to file an update without a valid architect's stamp. I nodded slowly. It's done then. Not quite, he said, a glint in his eye. Your father just called my office. He wants a meeting. He says there's been a misunderstanding. I smiled, a cold, sharp smile that mirrored his own. Tell him I'm busy. Tell him I'm building something new. And tell him to check his insurance policy. He's going to need it. I could hear the chaos before I even saw it. Brianna had called 3 times in the last 10 minutes, and when I finally picked up, her voice was a high-pitched squeal of panic. The city inspector is here. He's putting red tags on the construction site. You have to do something. I didn't say a word. I just hung up. The satisfaction wasn't warm. It was cold and sharp like the blade of a knife. Mr. Vance looked at me from across his desk. The insurance company just called, he said calmly. They're pulling the policy. Operating without a licensed lead architect is a violation of their terms, retroactive to the moment you were fired. I nodded. This was the secondary twist, the trap they hadn't seen coming. My architectural license wasn't just a certificate on the wall. It was the key that unlocked their liability coverage. Without me, every worker on every site was an uninsured lawsuit waiting to happen. The $85 million in contracts wasn't just gone. It was now a massive liability. And then came the criminal twist. Mr. Vance slid a folder across the desk. We also found something interesting in the billing records, he said. Your father has been charging clients for the premium green tech materials specified in your designs. But the purchase orders show he's been buying standard non-compliant materials and pocketing the difference. I stared at the documents. My father wasn't just incompetent, he was a fraud. He had been using my reputation to sell sustainability, then delivering cheap knockoffs to fund Brianna's marketing budget. This is fraud, I said, the realization settling in my stomach like lead. Grand larceny, actually, Mr. Vance corrected, given the dollar amounts. My phone buzzed again. A text from Brianna. Dad is freaking out. He says he's going to lose the house. Please, Sophia, just come back. I looked at the message, then at the evidence of fraud on the desk. They weren't sorry. They were scared. They were drowning in a mess of their own making, and they expected me to be the lifeboat. But I wasn't a lifeboat anymore. I was the storm. Do you want to file the report? Mr. Vance asked. Or do you want to use it? I picked up the folder. I'll use it, I said. I'm going to give them one last chance to see exactly what they threw away. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. Prepare the settlement agreement, I told him. I have a feeling they're going to be very eager to sign. I walked out of the law firm and into the afternoon sun. The city looked different today. Sharper, clearer. For the first time in 10 years, I wasn't carrying the weight of my father's expectations or my sister's ego. I was carrying only the truth. And the truth was a heavy, dangerous thing. I got into my car and drove toward my apartment. I knew they would be there. I knew they would come to me. And when they did, I would be ready. The foundation had crumbled. Now it was time to clear the rubble. I heard the frantic knocking on my door just as the sun began to set. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. My father Richard was sweating through his linen shirt, his face pale and desperate. Brianna stood behind him, her perfect makeup streaked with tears, looking less like a managing partner and more like a child who had lost her balloon. I didn't open the door immediately. I let them knock for another minute, let them feel the weight of the silence, the weight of being on the outside looking in. Finally, I unlocked the deadbolt, but kept the chain engaged. I opened the door a crack. "Sophia," my father gasped, pushing his face toward the gap. "Thank God. You have to come back. The insurance, they pulled it. The sites are shut down. We're losing $80,000 a day in penalties." Brianna pushed forward, her voice shrill. "And the clients are suing us. They say the contracts are void because you left. You have to tell them you're coming back. You have to fix this." I looked at them, really looked at them. For years I had seen them as giants, as the arbiters of my worth. But now, seeing them sweaty and panicked on my doorstep, I realized they were just empty suits. They were facades with no structure behind them. They had built their lives on my labor, my talent, my endurance. And the moment I removed my support, they collapsed. Charisma, I realized, is a powerful tool. It can win the room, it can sell the dream, it can get you the magazine cover. But charisma can't calculate a load-bearing wall. It can't navigate a zoning code. "I can't fix it," I said calmly. "Because I'm not the lead architect anymore. Remember, I was transitioned out." My father's face crumbled. "Sophia, please. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. We can make you partner. We can give you whatever you want. Just sign the insurance papers. We'll lose the house if you don't." I reached for the envelope I had prepared. I slid it through the crack in the door. "What is this?" Brianna asked, taking it with trembling hands. "That," I said, "is the evidence of the green tech fraud you've been running to pay for your marketing budget, and the termination notices for the clients who value integrity over image." My father stared at the envelope, then at me, horror dawning in his eyes. "You." "I already did," I said. "I don't fix foundations built on lies, Dad. I condemn them." I closed the door. I heard my father shouting, heard Brianna sobbing, but I turned the deadbolt and walked away. The sound of their desperation faded as I walked deeper into my apartment, into the quiet, sturdy space I had built for myself. In the months that followed, the firm collapsed under the weight of lawsuits and fraud investigations. Richard was forced to sell his house and liquidate his assets to avoid jail time. He retired to a small rental, his reputation in ruins. Brianna was left with a title for a company that no longer existed, her influencer career tainted by the scandal. As for me, I launched Structure and Soul, a boutique firm dedicated to honest, sustainable design. I took the clients who cared about the work, not the name, and 6 months later, I stood in the atrium of my first solo project, a community center built with real green tech and honest materials. The light filtered through the glass, illuminating the strong, visible beams that held the roof. It wasn't just a building, it was a testament. And you certainly can't build a legacy on a stolen one. If you've ever been the one holding everything together while others took the credit, share this story. Let's remind the world that you can't build a legacy on a stolen foundation.